So, have you ever looked at a beautifully designed building, a spiraling seashell, or, even just your own hands, and felt like there was some kind of hidden rhythm to it all? Well, you aren't imagining things. There's actually this deeply embedded structural secret to our universe. It's kind of like a master blueprint. And today in this explainer, we're going to decode the whole thing.
All right, let's just dive right into it. 1.618. I mean, it looks pretty unassuming, right? It's literally just a decimal. But this specific number, which you might know as the golden ratio, or phi, is the absolute central mystery of our explainer today. Because believe it or not, this singular value somehow governs the geometry of life, art, and literally even human psychology.
To really wrap our heads around the power of that number, we have to ask a rather, strange question. What exactly connects a pine cone sitting on a forest floor, the microscopic DNA inside your cells, and the totally chaotic numbers flashing on a stock market ticker? On the surface, absolutely nothing, right? They seem completely unrelated, and yet they actually share this fundamental, unbroken, mathematical bond.
Section 1. The mathematician and the pattern.
So to figure out where this sequence comes from, we got to start with Leonardo Fibonacci. He was an Italian mathematician living way back between roughly 1170 and 1250. Now, to be fair, he didn't exactly invent this math out of thin air. Ancient Indian mathematicians actually spotted similar patterns way earlier. But Fibonacci was the guy who really popularized it in the West. He was just playing around with a simple thought experiment about population growth, and it resulted in this incredibly specific sequence.
And the mechanics of this sequence, they are beautifully straightforward. You literally just start with 0 and 1. Then you simply add the last two numbers together to get the next one. So 1 plus 1 is 2. 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. Then you get 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, and it just keeps going on into infinity. The addition is basically elementary school math, but the result of this expanding sequence is honestly profound.
Now, you might be wondering, how does this connect back to our mystery number? Well, as these Fibonacci numbers get larger, passing 8, 13, 21, 34, 55, if you take one number and divide it by the number right before it, the result gets closer and closer to, you guessed it, 1.618, the golden ratio. These super simple addition steps are literally spiraling right toward this highly precise universal constant.
Moving on to Section 2, the strategy of nature.
Okay, math on a chalkboard is one thing, right? But out in the real world, this sequence actually operates as nature's ultimate blueprint. Just look at the cross-section of a nautilus shell. As the creature inside grows, obviously, its shell has to expand. And by growing in a spiral that expands by exactly the golden ratio, the shell maintains constant proportions at every single stage of its life. It's a total game changer for the nautilus, because it can literally grow forever without ever throwing off its structural balance.
And it turns out nature uses this little efficiency trick everywhere. Take a look at phyllotaxes. That's the fancy term for the arrangement of leaves on a plant stem. They grow at a very specific angle of 137.5 degrees. That's actually mathematically derived from the golden ratio, and it guarantees that no single leaf blocks the sunlight from the one right below it. How cool is that? Or look at sunflowers. They pack their seeds in opposing spirals, usually 34 spirals in one direction and 55 in the other. Those are perfect consecutive Fibonacci numbers, working together to totally optimize the space. Even the way tree branches split follows these precise counts. So yeah, nature, turns out she's a pretty brilliant mathematician.
Section 3. The human blueprint.
But hey, we aren't just observing this math out in the forest. We are quite literally built using it. Seriously, look down at your own body right now. If you measure the distance from the floor up to your navel and then multiply that by 1.618, boom, you'll get your total height. Or check out your arm. The length of your forearm relative to your hand, yep, that's a golden ratio right there. Our very own physical proportions, our built-in visual harmony, they're governed by this exact same mathematical constant.
And it gets even more astonishing when we zoom in and out, contrasting our macro and microbiology. On a macro scale, if you trace back the biological history of a male's ancestors, specifically the ones who passed down an X chromosome, the count follows the Fibonacci sequence flawlessly. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. It's wild! But then, if you zoom all the way down to the microscopic level, a single DNA molecule is exactly 34 angstroms long, an angstrom being a tiny microscopic unit of measure. And it's 21 angstroms wide, 34 and 21.
2 consecutive Fibonacci numbers, creating the absolute most optimal proportion for compact biological storage.
Which brings us to Section 4, Aesthetics and Market Psychology.
So, what happens when humans take this deeply ingrained biological pattern and start applying it to totally abstract concepts? Well, in design and art, we rely heavily on the rule of thirds, right? Which is really just a simplified application of the golden ratio. We see it everywhere in classical architecture too, like the Parthenon in Greece. We build these huge structures and paint these beautiful canvases using these exact proportions, simply because our brains inherently perceive them as visually stable and pleasing. We're literally drawn to the math without even realizing we're doing it.
Now, what's really interesting about this next slide is seeing how that subconscious preference bleeds into pure unadulterated chaos. Looking at this chart of the stock market, you'd probably think it's entirely unpredictable, right? Just a mess driven by random human emotion. And yet, financial traders consistently use what's called Fibonacci retracement levels. These are specific percentages like 23.6%, 38.2%, and 61.8%, all mathematically derived directly from our sequence. Traders use these exact mathematical levels to predict where a stock's price will naturally find support or resistance. That is crazy.
But really, why on earth does the financial market follow the math of a forest pine cone? Well, as this quote perfectly summarizes, it acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy of human behavior. These market patterns exist because human psychology, the collective brain power of millions of individual traders, is quite literally wired to subconsciously seek out, react to, and find stability in these specific ratios. Basically, we are projecting our own biological blueprint right onto our financial graphs.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway, and honestly, a question I really want to leave you pondering today. Throughout this explainer, we've seen the 1.618 ratio pop up in shells, in sunflowers, inside our own DNA, in our grandest architecture, and even in our global economics. But is the golden ratio truly this unbreakable rule of nature that the entire universe just has to follow? Or is it simply a pattern that we humans, because of our own biology, are just fundamentally wired to seek out and replicate in everything we do? Whatever the actual answer is, I really hope this explainer has given you a brand new mathematical lens to view this beautiful, highly structured world around us. Thanks so much for joining me.